Welcome to Mooney Reads. My name is Beck, and today I'm going to be giving you some recommendations for the Rent Readathon. The Rent Readathon is something that Kathy Tridhart and I are hosting in February. We've put together prompts based off of the characters in Rent that we used last year for the Rent Readathon. This year we have also added some prompts based off of its creator, Jonathan Larson. In this video, I'm going to be giving you some book recommendations based off of the prompts that we have. I have one book per character or person. Each of the books that I'm discussing covers at least two of the prompts within each character. So for each character, we have 3 prompts. And a lot of the books that I'm recommending cover multiple characters, actually. So I have one for each character, but I'll also talk about how you can use it if you're planning on doing other characters or if you're planning on trying to hit like maybe 1 per character, or if you just want to do a different character altogether. You'd have lots of options. Then at the end, I have 3 honorable mentions that fit in with multiple prompt categories. So the first character that we have is Mark. And the prompts that we made for Mark were to read a book associated with film, read a biography or memoir, or to read a book with Jewish representation. The book that I chose to recommend actually hits on all 3 of these. And that is The Gentrification of the Mind by Sarah Schulman. This is part memoir, part social analysis, and she's looking at kind of the social response to the AIDS epidemic. She's specifically looking at the role that gentrification played on a lot of different levels. So like literal gentrification, so people would die of complications due to AIDS, and then their apartments would be given to somebody who would pay like triple the rent. But also gentrification of different ideas in the art scene and gentrification of grieving. There are certain people who are allowed to be grieved and certain people who aren't. I go into a lot more detail if you're interested in one of my reading vlogs. It's hard to talk about this and not talk way too long. But it is an incredible book. This book covers all 3 of these prompts because clearly it's got memoir elements. It is associated with film because it is talking about art. Art in the broadest sense, including film. It actually specifically mentions filmmakers. I watched one of the films as I was reading this, and the person who wrote this book also did a film on Act Up, which I highly recommend. I'll link both of the films that I just mentioned in the comments below, and if you check out the reading vlog, I also talk about both of those documentaries in there. And then this fits the prompt of Jewish protagonist, Jewish representation, because the author is Jewish. Now, I said in the beginning of the video that a lot of these books fit multiple characters prompts. So other than clearly being perfect for Mark, this fits Joanne because it is nonfiction. It's good for Mimi because this centers the HIV and AIDS epidemic. And it fits Jonathan Larson because this is about New York. But with that, we can move on to Roger. For Roger's character, we have to read a book about music, read a contemporary, and or read a book that deals with addiction. And for this, I chose Laura Jane Grace's memoir. Laura Jane Grace is the lead singer of the band Against Me. This is her experience growing up in the punk community. She talks very candidly about her relationships and what it was like coming out in that environment. This obviously works because it is about music, but she also talks about her issues with drug abuse as well, which makes it fit for Roger doubly. This would also work for Mark because it's a memoir, Joanne because it's nonfiction, and Angel because Laura Jane Grace is trans. For the next prompt, we have Maureen. And for Maureen, you can read a book with bi representation, you can read something weird, or you can read a poem or a book about a performance artist. For Maureen, I have Nevada by Imogen Binnie. This novel focuses on Maria, a trans woman in New York who is dealing with a quarter-life crisis, basically. She's in her late 20s, stuff is falling apart with her girlfriend, and she's realizing how much she doesn't know about herself. This is told almost in stream of consciousness, like there are no quotation marks. So it definitely fits into something weird in that regard. It's definitely not for everyone. Maria is a complicated character. It's definitely very messy. It's dark. It's kind of graphic so far as sexual content goes. There's also a lot of conversation about transness, or at least Maria's like experience of certain things like gender dysphoria, but also towards the end, it kind of critiques some frameworks of transness that were created by cis people. So there's a lot going on in here. Definitely fits the weird category. There's technically bi rep. I don't think the main character is bi. I want to say the main character is a lesbian. But her girlfriend is bi. That character is not necessarily going to have a front seat in the story per se. But they do mention that she's bisexual. It's been over a year since I've read this, but I'm pretty confident that the main character was lesbian, so this would fit for Joan as well. It's got trans representation, so it would fit Angel's prompt. And it would fit Jonathan Larson because the first good bit of it is set in New York, despite it being called Nevada. Only the last, third is set in Nevada. Next, we have the prompts for Joan. For Joan, you can read a book centering law, a nonfiction book, and a book with lesbian representation. And for that, I have In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. And this was so good. This was the best memoir, this tied for the best memoir that I read in 2020. This focuses on the author's experience with domestic violence in a relationship with another woman. It's told in second person, so the vast majority of it, she says, you did this rather than I or she. So this is very immersive. It's written in a very interesting way. And alongside, the main chunk of it that's written in second person, it is framed by, social context. So in parts of it, it talks about media and how queer relationships between women are portrayed. And near the end, it also talks about what has happened legally with women who have tried to get domestic violence help when they're in a relationship with another woman. So in that way, it fits Joanne's prompt. So it does deal with law, even if that's not the main focus. And it is also a nonfiction. Now, it does not fit the lesbian prompt because the author is bisexual, but that means that this also works for Maureen. I would say that the something weird aspect of Maureen may also fit this as well because it's told in second person. It would also fit Mark because it is a memoir. And then it would fit Collins as well because the author is a queer person of color. Now we move on to Angel. For Angel, you can read a book with anti-capitalist themes, a book that centers romance or other love, and a book with trans representation. And for this, I'm going to be recommending Depart by Sim Kern. This is a novella that focuses on a trans man who is dealing with the immediate fallout of a hurricane. He is in a sports arena just trying to stay safe, basically. He's just lost his home, and he's trying to deal with living in this space with other people. And in the midst of all of this, he is seeing the ghost of his great-grandfather. So this fits Angel's prompts because the main character is trans, and it centers community, which I think would count as another kind of love. This would also work for Mark because the main character is Jewish, and Jewish identity actually plays a big role in this. Next, we have Collins. For Collins, you can read a book about a teacher or a book that teaches you. You can read a sci-fi book, and you can read a book with a queer person of color. For this, I have chosen The Gilda Stories by Joel Gomez. This is a story that spans across 300 years. It starts in 1850 and ends in 2050. The main character escapes from slavery and is taken in by vampires. Eventually, she chooses to be changed into a vampire, and throughout this book, you see kind of how society is changing, especially within Black communities, because she tends to stay there. And then towards the end, it also deals with like climate change and like global warming as well. This is an important piece of Afrofuturist literature and lesbian literature. This counts for Collins because it is sci-fi, and the main character is a queer person of color. Also, one of the secondary characters is a queer person of color. This would also fit Joanne for lesbian representation. I don't think they say the word lesbian, but this is generally seen as like lesbian literature, and I don't think that the main character, ever shows an interest in men. And this would also count for Jonathan Larson because part of it is set in the future, and there's definitely dystopian elements with that. The next character is Mimi, and for Mimi, you can read a book centering HIV and AIDS, you can read a graphic novel, and you can read a book with a fiery character. For Mimi, I am recommending Like a Love Story by Abdi Nazemian. This story focuses on three friends: Reza, who is a closeted Iranian boy who just moved to New York; Judy, a straight girl who is very involved in the local gay community, including their chapter of ACT UP, because her uncle is gay and her best friend is gay. Her best friend is the third character, and his name is Art. He's the only out gay boy in his school. When Judy and Reza meet, Judy has feelings for him. Now, as much as the plot is about that, there's also a significant part of it that happens at ACT UP meetings, at protests, and the way that this setting is used talks about a lot of those events really well. I will say they also mention the Iranian Revolution. It's not set in Iran, but I think that it's important to mention that the author also pulls that in as well. So that's significant. But some of the events that happen in the book, like I said, happen during protests. I don't want to say too much about how else it becomes central. But it definitely fits Mimi in that regard. And then this also fits for Mimi because this book has a very fiery character, Art. Like a Love Story would also fit for Jonathan Larson because it is set in New York. Finally, we have Jonathan Larson's prompt. For this, you can read a book set in New York, you can read a book set in the future, and or you can read a dystopian. So, for that, I chose The Seep by Hannah Porter. In The Seep, aliens have taken over the Earth. They have brought a lot of different technologies, and society is set up totally differently. It is basically a stateless, moneyless society. The technology that The Seep has brought, or is, kind of unclear, has totally revamped medicine, but The Seep is also a hallucinogenic. So there's a lot of cool technology, but also like drugs, lots of drugs. The bulk of the story happens after the main character's wife uses this technology and decides to be born again. So a lot of the story is our main character grieving. So this fits Jonathan Larson because it's set in the future. Whether what's going on is utopia or dystopia, you can read and figure it out. This fits in for a few other categories as well. I would say that it fits Maureen for something weird to a certain extent, because weird stuff definitely starts happening. I would say that it fits Roger because it definitely deals with addiction. Our main character definitely turns to alcohol. It fits Angel because the main character is trans, and it fits Collins because it is sci-fi. Now, I have 3 more books because I really like them and they fit multiple prompts, so here we are, you get 3 more. As if all of the ones that I've already talked about weren't enough to pick from. These 3 recommendations are also different genres. So there you go. I'll start with the nonfiction pick, which is Captive Genders, Trans Embodiment in the Prison Industrial Complex. This anthology includes works written by academics, but also people who were formerly or presently incarcerated. This talks about issues of the prison industrial complex and how it particularly impacts trans and queer people. This would fit for Joanne because it deals with law and it's nonfiction. It would fit for Angel because there is a lot in here critiquing capitalism and like explicitly anti-capitalist. It also fits Angel because trans representation. There are a lot of people in here who are trans that are writing, and the majority of this centers around how issues impact trans people. It would fit Collins because it will teach you something, and because there are a lot of queer people of color discussed in this and that wrote and contributed to this. It would fit Mimi because there are also sections of this that center HIV and AIDS. So that is Captive Genders. Hopefully sometime this year I'll actually have a whole video on this book, kind of breaking a lot of it down. The next book that I have to recommend is a book of poetry. That is Homie by Danez Smith. In this book, they talk a lot about community, especially looking within the Black community. They also talk about queerness and their experience as someone who is HIV positive. With all of that, I would say this definitely fits Maureen for it being poetry. I would argue that this would also fit Joanne because poetry is nonfiction and is also, I would argue, a form of memoir. So I would say that it fits those categories as well. This fits Angel because the author is non-binary, so that's trans representation. And then it also talks a lot about community, so that's centering another type of love. It also fits Collins because the author is a queer person of color. And Mimi because they talk, at least in part, about their experience having HIV. Then finally, I have a fiction book to recommend, and that is Drag King Dreams by Leslie Feinberg. This novel is set in New York post 9/11. It talks a lot about different social issues going on at the time. This deals heavily with hate crimes, and it also looks at community. It looks at the gay community, it looks at the local community, and kind of more broadly how people are being treated. This was an incredible book. Leslie Feinberg is an absolute must-read in general. Leslie Feinberg, I think, is most well known for Stone Butch Blues, for good reason, because Stone Butch Blues is excellent. But hardly anyone talks about Drag King Dreams. But in a lot of ways, this is a follow-up to Stone Butch Blues. You don't need to have read Stone Butch Blues to know what's going on here, and they're not even about the same characters, but they are about kind of the same community. It's looking at the queer community, and it's also looking at interactions within the queer community and within other places that queer people are. In Stone Butch Blues, they talked a lot about like working class people. In Drag King Dreams, there's a lot about community on a lot of different levels. Of course, they talk about the gay community. They also talk about like the local communities within this specific part of New York. So these different communities interacting. It also talks a lot about Jewish communities as well. A huge theme throughout all of this is solidarity. Like, despite differences in kind of how you approach identity or how you approach certain things within the community, solidarity within communities and between communities is incredibly important. So, with all that being said, this book fits for Mark because there's a Jewish protagonist. It fits with Joanne because there's lesbian representation, Angel because there's trans representation and anti-capitalist themes. It also fits Mimi because there is a lot surrounding HIV and AIDS within this. And it fits for Jonathan Larson because it is set in New York. So, there are just a few recommendations, a few options that you can take with you going into February, thinking over your TBR for the Rent Readathon. If you've read any of these, definitely let me know about it in the comments below, or if you think you might pick one of these up, definitely let me know about that too. Thank you all so much for watching. Bye.